All right, I think we're almost ready to call the meeting to order. Excellent, good. Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Richmond City Plan Commission meeting of February 1, 2024 to order. If we please have roll call.
Yes, we may. Chair Tucker,
Present.
Vice Chair Harrison,
Here.
Secretary Brubaker,
Here.
Commissioner Loy,
Here.
Commissioner Argawal, and Commissioner He.
Here.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance this evening. Let's go to approval of minutes, and we have no minutes to approve. So the next item on the agenda, we'll kind of move things around because we don't have a consent calendar either. This is going to be a short time tonight. All right, we'll now move to the public forum. And again, for anyone in the audience and or watching online, this is an opportunity for you to express thoughts and ideas on any item that is not on tonight's agenda, but is relevant to the commission's purpose. You may submit a speaker's form or raise a hand on the Zoom, and staff will call you in. At this time, you will have 3 minutes per speaker to speak to, again, anything not on the agenda under public forum. Do we have anyone in the queue? Let me start there.
Yes, Chair, we do have one public speaker lined up for virtual public comment. Would you like me to call him?
Yes, please call that person.
All right, Bruce Bayard, if you could go ahead and speak, you'll have 3 minutes.
Chair Tucker, members of the Commission, my name is Bruce Byard. I'm the Chair of Track Trails for Richmond Action Committee. I'd like to raise with you the broad issue of application of the Shoreline Overlay District under public forum, not under the IMTT project. We don't want to, Track does not want to confuse or delay the IMTT project over this broader issue. Commissioner Brubaker and I met with Director Lena Blasco late this afternoon to discuss this. And the problem is that the Shoreline Overlay District language by itself clearly applies to all of Richmond's shoreline. So the shoreline mapping appears to be an error in appearing to show some areas not subject to it. The Shoreline District Ordinance has 2 requirements. One is maximum feasible access to a 100-foot shoreline band. And secondly, completing the Bay Trail during over a public access zone between the shoreline and the nearest public street or arterial. The ordinance itself clearly describes how to handle areas that are subject to Homeland Security regulations, which by themselves clearly prohibit public access. However, there are areas not subject to Homeland Security where public access would be feasible. So we've talked with Director Velasco about a consultant she is hiring to revisit this and take a look at the mapping. It's very subtle. If an area does not have a line on the shoreline, it's being interpreted to be excluded from the Shoreline Overlay District. And so that is the problem. And we're hoping the Planning Commission can help resolve that in the future. We don't want to delay the IMT project over this, but I do want to bring it to your attention. It's something to be addressed and resolved for the city to do what it can to complete the Bay Trail in Richmond. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'd be delighted to try to answer them.
Thank you. I don't see questions.
I wonder if I could ask a clarifying question. I am wondering if there's examples of access at port facilities that have actually used the overlay district. Do you know, Bruce?
Yes, there are some very good examples. An excellent one is the City of Richmond's Point Patrol Marine Terminal, where when the City and Port of Richmond designed and planned the auto import facilities that are thriving there now, we were able to work with the port and find a way to allow the Bay Trail to extend out Canal Boulevard along the southern shoreline of the Point Patrol Marine Terminal, all the way to Red Oak Victory and the whirly crane. So that was feasible in a port area where the current zoning map shows you don't have to require public access. Another really good example, a very different one, is the KKMI Boatyard. It has a wonderful public access trail from Canal Boulevard where you have an opportunity to walk through this world-class boatyard, quite impressive, and stroll along the shoreline. So these are two areas where it's been very feasible to provide public access, in one, a working boatyard, and the other, a working port facility. So we wouldn't want zoning ordinance to exclude those opportunities or prevent the city from obtaining public access and completing the Bay Trail in other areas in the Harbor, Santa Fe, and Morrison Channel areas.
Okay,
So-
thanks, Bruce.
Any other questions for Bruce? Yes, Commissioner Alpha. The little buttons on your.
Thank you, Chair Tucker. I just have a question, which is I would love an update on the Hilltop Horizon plan. Has it gone in front of City Council? Has the vendor provided options, or just an update?
Okay, we'll take that to the end of the commission business and ask the question of staff and address it at that time. All right, any other questions for track at this point? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Bruce. And let's see, do we have anyone in the audience who wishes to address the commission on any items not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, if I can get a motion to close public forum.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to close public forum. All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Any noes? Any opposition? Okay, excellent. All right, let's move on to the next item, which is item number 1 under new under new business, PLN 23-119 IMTT Renewable Fuels Project. This is a public hearing to consider a conditional use permit and design review for construction of additional terminal infrastructure at the existing International Matex Tank Terminal, Richmond, California terminal facility, including 5 new above-ground tanks for ethanol and renewable diesel storage, and 4 additional rail spurs to accommodate 20 rail car spots at 100 Cutting Boulevard. And we will hear from staff first on the report, and then we will entertain questions from the commission. So I'll just turn over to staff now.
Thank you, Chair Tucker, and members of the commission. Good afternoon and good year. I don't think we've convened this year, so Happy New Year. This item is, as Chair Tucker mentioned, a request for a design review permit and conditional use permit amendment to allow additional terminal infrastructure construction at the existing IMTT facility. I am going to share a brief slide deck here to serve as a visual aid. So as for the existing facility, it's located in the Santa Fe channel of the Richmond Inner Harbor. The facility is a 22-acre onshore bulk liquid storage and distribution terminal that handles petrochemicals, vegetable oils, fuel oils, caustic soda, and paraffin wax. The IMTT facility currently contains about 48 storage tanks along with support facilities. The existing tanks range up to 54 feet in height and up to 128 feet in diameter. And the facility also has 2 truck racks and an existing rail car loading and unloading facility. As far as surrounding uses go, the area surrounding the IMTT facility is characterized by a mix of light and heavy industrial activities as well as maritime operations. So what you see on the slide deck here is an aerial of the IMTT property as well as its surrounding vicinity. There are some previous approvals that apply to this site. And in 2008, the Planning Commission adopted the IMTT installation project initial study mitigated negative declaration, which granted approval for a CUP and design review permit, enabling IMTT to construct 3 above-ground tanks. which were designated for the storage of petrochemical products such as gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. Subsequently, in 2015, the city prepared an addendum to the 2008 ISMND, that's Initial Study Mitigating Negative Declaration, and approved a conditional use permit amendment that authorized the modification to the 2008 project. That modification allowed IMTT to replace one of the previously approved tanks with a smaller tank designated for the containment of caustic soda instead of petrochemical products. And to date, only the caustic soda tank has been installed under the 2015 conditional use permit amendment. As far as the current proposal, the applicant, IMTT Richmond, California, again, is requesting a design review permit and conditional use permit amendment to allow the construction of this additional tank infrastructure or terminal infrastructure, which includes 5 new above-ground tanks for ethanol and renewable diesel storage and 4 additional rail spurs to accommodate up to 20 rail car spots. The key components are shown on the site plan that you're going to see here on the screen in a moment, and the projects could take place in 2 phases. So this is the current phase of the project that was reviewed under the environmental review for the current project. At this point in time, IMTT is looking to install a 105,000 barrel capacity ethanol tank. You can see here towards the right-hand side of the screen in the cloud bubble, that's the larger of the 2 circles towards the shore side of the IMTT facility. The other tank that's proposed would have a capacity of 53,000 barrels and would store renewable diesel. Aside from the tanks at this moment, the IMTT facility is also looking to expand their rail car loading operation by adding 2 new rail spurs with 10 rail car spots for unloading of renewable diesel and ethanol. So that's at the upper portion of the site plan there in red. The existing rail car loading is located right underneath that in the blue. In addition to that, IMTT is looking to modify the existing truck rack, which would accommodate loading of ethanol. That is going to be at the lower left-hand side towards Cutting Boulevard in the red cloud. There's also piping that is going to be installed at the dock for unloading of ethanol from ships. So that is the current phase of the project. Moving into potential future projects, which were analyzed as part of the environmental document, but are not necessarily being sought for a building permit at this point in time. That would include 2 additional rail spurs with 10 rail car spots, which would be just south of the rail car spots that are proposed now in the current phase. This would also include a 30,000 barrel tank capacity caustic soda tank, a 40,000 barrel capacity tank for the renewable diesel and ethanol storage, as well as a 53,000 tank capacity for renewable diesel and ethanol. Again, I repeat, this is a future phase of the project, not necessarily what IMTT is looking to permit at this time. I'll actually go back to the current project here. So as far as the zoning analysis goes, staff did take a look at our zoning code for conformance of this project with the zoning ordinance. It requires a design review for an industrial addition that's over 1,000 square feet. Because the project exceeds the threshold, design review permit is being required. I mentioned earlier that the IMTT facility has an existing conditional use permit that was approved in 2008 and amended in 2015. Since the facility is proposing new infrastructure that wasn't previously approved, a conditional use permit amendment is required. As far as the approvals are concerned tonight, the Planning Commission is the decision maker for both permits, the design review permit as well as the conditional use permit. However, the design review board was the recommending body for the design review permit. The Design Review Board considered the proposed project on their January 24th meeting and recommended conditional approval of the Design Review Permit. In regards to its recommendation, the board encouraged the applicant to satisfy its public art obligation under the ordinance by including on-site public art, such as a sculpture within an upgraded landscaping area along Cutting Boulevard. And you could see this landscaping landscaped area here towards the front part of the site here, just west of the administration building. So it's this landscaped area here. Aside from that, the Design Review Board recommended approval of the project, and their suggestion for the public art to be incorporated in the landscape is incorporated in the conditions of approval. We also checked for development standard compliance, and this included review with regards to height restrictions, setbacks, and landscaping. The project does meet all of those development standards. Moving on to environmental review. The proposed project involves the installation of additional infrastructure, which was not previously evaluated under the previous environmental documents. Therefore, the city hired LSA Associates to perform additional environmental review and determine whether the proposed project could lead to new or more significant impacts compared to those identified in the previous environmental documents. You have the initial study checklist in Exhibit B to your staff report, and it concludes that no further environmental review is required. This is because all of the potentially significant impacts of the project have either been analyzed in previous environmental documents, and there's also a mitigation monitoring reporting program attached to your staff report, which lists all the mitigation measures that IMTT will be incorporating from those previous documents to mitigate impacts. The impact areas that are to be mitigated are in the topic areas of air quality, archaeological resources, geology and soils, hydrology and water quality, and noise. And those are, again, outlined in the mitigation monitoring reporting program. Happy to expand on those if you'd like. I'll go on to public comments. The applicant did reach out to the Marina Bay Neighborhood Council back in September of last year, contacted Ms. Midas, who is the president of that neighborhood council, and provided information about the project. We have not since heard back from the neighborhood council, so no additional comments have been tendered from them. We did get comments from TRAC on January 23rd. Bruce Byert alluded to those. Essentially, in its comments, TRAC stated that the project site is located within the city's shoreline overlay district and should be required to design and construct a multi-use trail and landscaping improvements that are in conformance with the ferry to bridge to Greenway Complete Streets plan along the frontage. And with that, I'll put up another slide here. This is the shoreline overlay district map that Bruce was referring to. As you could see, the project site is located in the channel. Sort of, the zoning tools that we use as staff is the mapping for the zoning and overlay districts. There's a similar overlay district map for creeks that specifies specific setbacks from creeks. This one is the one that pertains to the application of the shoreline overlay district. The purple line that is along the shoreline indicates where the shoreline overlay district was, at least from staff's perspective, intended to apply, and you could see that the project site is not located along one of those purple segmented lines. So again, we've had that discussion with Bruce, as well as with Director Velasco. I understand that this is an item that should be further studied and come back to the commission at a later time. Aside from those comments, we have not received any additional public comments, and at this time, we would recommend that the Planning Commission make the findings in the attached resolution to the staff report, which would recommend approval of the project, subject to conditions. Some of the key conditions to highlight here would be to require the applicant to carry out the project in conformance with the project plans, require the applicant to implement the MMRP, or the Mitigation Monitoring Reporting Program. There's also a condition in there to require the applicant include either on-site publicly accessible art valued at 1% of the building development costs, or to pay an in lieu contribution of 1%, or to cite public art on an alternative site. Another condition that speaks to the shoreline overlay district would be to require the applicant to make a voluntary contribution of $2,000 to the city's implementation of the Ferry to Bridge to Greenway Complete Streets plan. We are also conducting a nexus study currently for all the areas affected by the Ferry to Greenway I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the last, it's a long acronym, but the Complete Streets plan We are making sure that we are able to identify what areas will be subject to these fees in the future, to be able to calculate specifically what factors are going to go in there, if it's a measure of linear frontage that determines what the cost of the contribution is going to be, or an intensity of the project development. So there's many factors to be considered there. Eventually, what we want to arrive to is a written requirement similar to the public art ordinance, where people have the option to either pay an in lieu fee to build the Bay Trail themselves. Something that is, pretty transparent, consistent, and not something where, developers have to guess on a case-by-case basis. That pretty much wraps up. The other conditions are having to do with BCDC jurisdiction. We just want to make sure that the applicant goes out to BCDC and obtains the necessary permits if they're applicable. And there's also conditions that will regulate the lighting, noise, and other orders that would emanate potentially from the site. So with that, we do recommend that the Planning Commission adopt the resolution approving the project. That concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions. We do have some of the project team here with us tonight, including Tracy Johnson from IMTT. Shannon Bottenberg is here in the audience from WSP, and she's representing the applicant as well. And virtually, we also have Shanna Geiler from LSA, who prepared the environmental document.
All right. Thank you for the staff report. At this time, are there any questions of staff on what we just heard? And I'll start with my right. Commissioner Alpha.
Yes, I'd like to understand what can go wrong with these tanks. What are the negatives?
I think I might defer that question to the applicant. Tracy Johnson's here from IMTT, and they know all about their tanks and infrastructure, so I'll defer that question to them.
Sure. So with any tank, you want to make sure the product stays inside the container. So what we do is we build our tanks to a certain standard. It's API code 650, which has very detailed specific requirements to maintain the integrity of the tank. We also have an asset integrity inspection program, and that inspection program needs to conform with API 653. As part of any due diligence, we have daily operators that walk around, do inspections, make sure that the tank looks like it should, smells like it should, and nothing unusual is going on. We operate 11 terminals today. We've owned 19 in our history, and we've never had a tank failure. That would be the worst case scenario. If you did have a tank failure, the contents of the tank would be released, but you have secondary containment or berms or walls, depending on the location, to contain the contents of that product.
A follow-up question that if even the second tank were to fail, this material, does it sort of like go out in the air? Like, what's the pollution impact of this?
That's a good question. Okay, so there's two products and two different types of tanks. So for the renewable diesel tank, this is chemically identical to the diesel you would put into an on-road vehicle. That is going to go into what's called a cone roof or fixed roof tank. So very similar to a coffee can. There are vents at the top of the tank. So as you load product into the tank, that headspace above the liquid, as the liquid level rises, any vapors of the product in that headspace would be pushed out of the tank. And then similarly, as you draw the product out of that tank, the liquid level goes down and draws in fresh air. So you would have emissions from the product as you fill into the tank, and then also as the tank is static, the sun beats on the tank and will heat up during the course of the day that space. It'll expand, it'll push emissions out. Then as it cools in the afternoon, it'll suck in fresh air. Now, the good thing about renewable diesels is that the vapor pressure is quite low, so emissions are deemed insignificant. Shannon can tell you all the work that was done to develop an air permit application and to look at the emissions as part of that air quality study. The other type of tank that we're installing is for ethanol. So ethanol, just like the vodka in your martini, if you leave it out on the counter, it will evaporate because it does have a higher vapor pressure. So what we do for a tank like that or a product like that is you have, again, a fixed roof coffee can type tank, and then there's a floating roof that rests on the liquid surface, so that rises and lowers as the tank is filled and product is taken out, and that contact reduces emissions. I want to say it's well over 90%. It might be in the 95% range.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Tucker and fellow commissioners. I don't think that I have a question so much as maybe a couple comments. First, Tracy, I really appreciate your descriptions. That was much less science-y and very visual. And then there was a martini reference. I wish it was Friday. Actually, staff, I wanted to, and LSA, I wanted to compliment you both. I was ready to start asking questions about the history of interactions with local tribal representatives, and I was impressed to see some familiar names and more than due diligence. It seems like we have some respectful relationships with our local tribes. So thank you very much for that. And I'll just go ahead and mute myself now.
Thank you. I thank you for your question too, Alpa. I did have questions about air quality, and I wanted to make sure that the environmental review did review air quality. It seems like there was a section in the initial study regarding air quality, and I think some of the questions I had about vapor release was answered by the applicant just now. So thank you for that. One thing I would like to say, this is not a question, more like a statement, but there is a portion of this site, there's something like 1,000 feet of frontage along Cutting Boulevard. And there's a significant portion of the site, maybe 1/3, that has no sidewalk along Cutting. And the reason is that the train tracks are there. And so, you know, being a member of TRAC, we discussed this intensively to see if there was any nexus to figure out how to get sidewalk put in along Cutting, and with the confusion over the shoreline district, it just kind of we didn't see the direct correlation that we could ask for that. But I just wanted to bring that up and to say that it's unfortunate there's no sidewalk there. This is a train track improvement, but it doesn't, the tracks that are along Cutting are not part of the project that's being undergone. So we don't have an ask about that, but it's.
Well, let me get just ask a clarifying question. And our terminal manager is also in the audience too. So anything I say, if his face starts to squinch up, it means I'm wrong. But there's the road, the bike path, the rail track, and then as far as I know, there is a cement sidewalk the full length of our property that abuts up to our building. Are you talking about a sidewalk on the other side of the rail track?
East, no. If you go east of where your building is, and I believe it's between 3rd and 4th Street, there is no sidewalk there because there's no room. The tracks are close enough to the curb. There's not really room there for a sidewalk. Okay. So it might be, I think it's probably less than 1/3 of the total frontage that's shown in the study area map. that's on the eastern side of the property, so.
Through the chair, I would add that I'm familiar with that portion. And oddly enough, what I noticed was that there is a sign that indicates that that part of the property is private property. So I did go back to the office to check, but the parcel lines essentially wouldn't allow for a sidewalk unless there was a dedication of private property. So there is that additional constraint to being able to build a sidewalk there. It's not fully in the right of way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just wanted to bring that issue up. I'm not saying that that is, you know, a critical aspect. I just think it's unfortunate. Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Harrison. No question. Commissioner He.
Yeah, I just have two short questions. Going back to the evaporation question, so we've addressed how to mitigate evaporation during storage, but I'm just curious what kind of measures are there to prevent evaporation during transport?
Okay, that's a good question. Yeah,
and then-
I should have mentioned that earlier. So renewable diesel, similar to the tank, as it is transferred into any vessel, whether it's a rail car or a truck or barge, there will be some amount of vapors in that headspace that get pushed out as the product level goes up. Again, emissions are quite insignificant. For ethanol, though, again, higher vapor pressure, and you would see appreciable emissions from transfer or loading if you didn't control it. So in this case, we're going to be loading ethanol into tanker trucks, and the vapors from the tanker trucks will go into a vapor recovery unit. And it's a condensation type unit in that the vapors will be condensed and returned back into a tank. So no combustion, and essentially no product is lost. So that it is captured and returned to service.
Thank you. And I have one more question. These 5 tanks are designed for ethanol and diesel. Does the applicant envision the storage of other liquids in these tanks?
One of the tanks we had envisioned also storing caustic soda, but right now we don't own or manufacture the products that we store. We're really at the beck and call of our customers. But it is frankly a pain in the butt to launch a project. They're expensive, they're time consuming, and we have limited resources. So we will not construct a tank unless we are certain that that is a market that is here to stay, because it will take several years for us to get a return on our investment. So right now we see the world of possibilities being renewable diesel, ethanol, and caustic soda. And frankly, we don't have that much available space. So there's really no, beyond these tanks, there's no room for additional tankage.
Thank you.
So I just have to echo Commissioner Loy's comments. If you can present out on all our projects that come before us, that would be great. The way you describe things in a, I don't want to demean a fifth grader, but the way you explain it like you're talking to a fifth grader in a very descriptive way. So that's always, it's definitely appreciated for us non-scientific individuals. I just have a couple of questions. Based on the staff recommends the Planning Commission approve planning application, and then other things, there are some conditions. I got some questions on the conditions. On the first one is regarding the applicant to include on-site publicly accessible art valued at 1%. Is this site actually, is it publicly accessible? It doesn't seem to be with these type of tanks and
You
other
would think
measures.
so, yeah. We actually have the perfect spot of empty grass right in front of the terminal. So I'm not good at estimating distances, but maybe 100 feet by 100 feet. There's currently our sign and a flagpole and some firewater piping. yeah, and actually kudos to Hector for he was the one that spotted it as a potential site. We just assumed that nobody would want to put art on our site, but if you sit in our front office, you see people go by on bikes. Yeah, there you go. So we actually had a phone call today with Miss Winifred Day to talk about the public art process. It was super exciting. We spoke for a good hour about, I'm an engineer. I never thought I would get involved in an art project. So this is super exciting for us.
Then kudos to staff and others to have the creativity, to look at that as, while it might be a small parcel, it's visible. And so thank you, staff, for doing that. The other question I have then also regarding the contribution of 2000 to the city toward implementation of the ferry to bridge. The one sentence around the and additional amount, if applicable, is there one who doesn't like to put a condition on something that we have no price tag on? Is there a cap to what then would be the additional amount, or is it a dollar cap? Is there a percent cap?
No, and that amount would be determined by the Nexus study that Harris and Associates is putting together under the direction of the Public Works Department. This very issue came up on another project along Cutting Boulevard that didn't come to the commission but went to the Design Review Board, Svensson's Bay Marine project, and TRAC was also looking to have some contribution in a higher amount than $2,000 towards improvements for the Bay Trail. In that situation, we came across some staunch hesitation, I will say, from the applicant to make the payment that was being requested. Was in excess of $16,000, if I'm not mistaken. So as you can imagine, some applicants bring their lawyers to public hearings and say, hey, what's your reasoning? How did you calculate it? Why me? Why not, the other properties along Cutting Boulevard? Why am I stuck with the bill? And so in talking to our legal staff, we essentially decided that we would be on stronger legal grounds to be able to provide a nexus study that specifically ties to what's the project, what's the impact, are they demanding, pedestrian bicycle infrastructure, because some uses are going to have a higher draw for that particular activity than others. And then there's also the idea of, should you pay for Bay Trail improvements if you're doing an accessory structure? At what point do you get, do you trigger the improvements, and to what extent does that determine the magnitude of what the contribution is? So that's what the Nexus study is meant to determine. What are the factors that are going to be used to determine the contribution? And eventually we want to have something in our master fee schedule that says, here's when it applies, here's the calculation formula, so that people like Tracy and everybody else along the corridors can know that it's not being applied, on a case-by-case basis, but it's a holistic application of, contributions towards the Bay Trail.
Okay. No, I appreciate that, because I'm sure, no one wants surprises down the road. So thank you for that explanation. And then what is in terms of the duration, what's the start date, assuming everything gets through and permitted and so forth? What is the anticipated start date, and then how long will the project take to complete?
Tracy, I'll defer that to you. I'll just add that IMTT submitted a at-risk submission to the building department, so their building permits are already being plan checked while we are entertaining the entitlement. So I imagine that they're going to be ready to go with the issuance of building permits within another month or so, but Tracy could speak to, after they get the building permit, what the construction deadline looks like.
Ideally, we would start grading activities at a minimum, obviously as soon as the permits are issued, but within a month, that would be great. We still need to order equipment. Some items are longer lead than others, but definitely this year. I know grading is as soon as possible, but I want to see maybe mid-year for steel and infrastructure to come on site.
Okay. And then my last question, which was part of the reason for the ask when it's going to start. This is the city of Richmond, and I would be remiss if not asking who's going to be doing the work. Are there any local hire requirements on this project for Richmond Hire? And if not, what is the plan for the construction of these tanks and grading, and who's doing it?
That's a very good question. From the planning department standpoint, I know that there is an ordinance that requires local hire in certain instances. I don't know enough of the details to see whether it applies to this particular site. Tracy, I'm not sure if that's something that came up during your due diligence of the project, but feel free to expand on that.
Yeah, I don't know about any specific requirement that you're referring to. I can certainly look into it. I know we like to hire local labor whenever possible. I know that union labor, a significant component of union labor will be used for this project as well. But to be honest, I haven't been involved in great detail in the bidding process. But that's certainly something I can look into and report back.
Okay, I just want to go on record to make sure that that is something that is looked into. Just again, to ensure that while we are seeing great unemployment numbers, there's still a population out there that could use this type of labor and this type of training, because these are specific, specified type of jobs in trying to install tanks and so forth. So that'd be great for that kind of work.
Okay.
Okay, I have no other questions at this time. Any new questions, Commissioner Alpha?
Yeah, a quick question. You know, the area where the tanks are, is it at all possible to add some greenery to that area?
When you mean in the actual footprint of the terminal?
Yes.
We probably have limited availability for greenery, and I'll explain why. When you have a tank terminal, you've got tanks, and then you've got the immediate surrounding area, and then it'll as you move away from the tank, you'll have a secondary containment wall or berm, and that's that sort of wall that would keep any product in the event of a release. Anytime you have something with a root, a plant, a tree, it can permeate that structure. And just like the cracks you might see on a sidewalk, you would have cracks in your secondary containment. So it's generally considered a bad idea to have any sort of landscaping near tanks. Now, the further you move away, if you're outside that containment, there may be opportunities for landscaping, but in this particular facility, all of our plantable area is at the front of the facility on Cutting Boulevard. When I say the front, the rear, if it's really to the south, along the waterfront is concrete, it's dock structures, there's not much opportunity for landscaping.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before we close the public hearing, and we have the applicant in the room, do either of you wish to make any comments? And if not, no pressure. But I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge your presence. All right.
I have one additional question.
Commissioner Heath.
Sorry, since you mentioned that the grading process is ready to begin soon, I'm just wondering if how does the proposed grade, the proposed elevation compare to the existing condition, and does the project require a net export or import of dirt during the grading process?
The goal is to perform grading without any net export. This is a historic site, so it used to be a Texaco facility back in the 50s. So we would need to test the soil to make sure that it's usable and doesn't have any trace contaminations. But ideally, nothing will leave the site. The grading in the area of the tanks will be such, the intent of the grading around the tanks will be to improve drainage. And again, when you have a tank, you not only do you want to keep weeds away, you want to keep water away. You don't want water puddling around the base of the tank. So it'll be slightly graded just to make sure we have that proper drainage around the tanks. In the rail infrastructure area, there's some concrete slabs that need to be removed, and drainage improvements in that area. We do have a subsurface drainage system. In one area, there'll be one section will be moved of that drainage system. And all that is or was addressed in a drainage analysis, and that's probably not the term as part of our environmental technical reports.
Thank you.
Okay. Any last questions? All right. Then if I can get a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All right, great. It's been moved and second to close public hearing. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Any closing comments on this item before we make our take our vote? Going down the line, going down the line. Nothing. Okay. All right. So we are being asked to accept the tentative recommendation by staff, which is conditional approval, including the recommended conditions for PLN 23-119 IMTT Renewable Fuels Project. And I'll just ask for a roll call without having to go into all the other details. It's already written down.
Chair Tucker, do you want to call for a motion in a second?
Yeah, that's good. Hey, you know,
It's been a minute.
it's pretty much performative, but yes. If I get a motion to accept the tentative recommendation for conditional approval of PLN 23-119 IMTT Renewable Fuels Project.
I'll move that.
I'll second. All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
That way we won't have to worry about a roll call now.
Chair Tucker,
Yes.
Vice Chair Harrison,
Yes.
Secretary Brubaker,
Yes.
Commissioner Loy,
Yes.
Commissioner Argawal,
Yes.
and Commissioner He.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you. And for those who are watching, the Planning Commission decision may be appealed to the City Council by written notice thereof and payment of appeal fee to the City Clerk's Office in Planning Division by 5 p.m. on February 12th, 2023. Well, you know, staff, your calendar needs to be updated because you have 2023 on your agenda. So 2024. I know. Thank you, IMTT staff, for this presentation, and all the best for success in getting this up and running in 2024. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Now we can go on to commission business, and I know we'll start off. I know Commissioner Opel, you had a question regarding the Hilltop project.
Yes. What update do you have? Specifically, what are the latest designs that are in the hopper? When is it going to go? Is it going to return back to the Planning Commission? And then,
Yeah, so as you are aware, we previously completed the initial community outreach for the planning process. We brought the proposed land use diagrams in front of the Planning Commission for comment. We got really good feedback from the commission as a whole. We then went to the City Council, I believe, in December and had some limited feedback, but it was feedback. So at this point in time, we've received all the feedback from the different stakeholders, and we have a direction in terms of what to do, what we may not want to do. And so right now, we're in the process of refining the land use diagram so that we may come back to the Planning Commission and City Council to essentially check whether we heard what we heard and we implemented it correctly. So there's going to be another round of comments with a brand new land use diagram for you to comment on. And the objective there is to have a preferred land use alternative that we could base the policies and text of the specific plan off of. We are setting up weekly meetings with the Signature / Prologis team to sort of see if we can come to a happy state where we're, essentially they're hopefully building what the city would like to see based on the comment that we've gotten from different stakeholders. So you will either see a city-driven plan before you with a applicant-driven plan, or a combined plan where we're both in agreement. And whether we're in agreement or not is still yet to be seen, but we're getting really close. And I think we're really just stuck on the density question. The applicant, the potential applicant for the mall site is looking at densities that range from 13 to 20 dwelling units per acre, which essentially is a townhouse, row house product. And our stance is that that may be fine for a portion of the site, but we want a good mix of different land uses that achieve the PDA, priority development area, objectives that have been set forth by ABAG, MTC, make sure that the transit is coupled with the density to include affordable housing. So they're pushing us sort of lower density. We're pushing them the opposite way to go up. And so they're sort of saying, hey, this is what the market could support. And we're saying, hey, there should be a carve out where potentially in the future there could be a market for higher density. So that's the discussion that we're having, and we're having those discussions weekly. We would have liked to bring the land use diagrams back in February. It's looking like it's probably going to be more like March or April, but there will be a second iteration of the land use diagram for you guys to comment on.
So let me just make sure I understand. So what the city is saying is higher density, so more homes within the same sort of acre, right? Is that what the city is saying? And what the vendor, the Prologis is saying is that they want more spaced out homes, so more perhaps single family residences?
Not necessarily so much more spaced out. They're not considering any detached single family houses on single family lots, but they're looking to push townhouses, which are attached products. There's a density that's associated with that type of product, and we're pushing them to go higher than that for the overall site. There are portions of the Hilltop Mall site that could be suitable for townhouses with limitation. For example, along the Ring Road, there are Summer Lane, for example, is a townhouse product. So across the street, it would make sense to have townhouse product there. But for the remainder of the site going towards the east, that should be getting denser as you approach the retail and the main corridors, which are going to be your transit-oriented corridors. So that's the discussion that we're having.
So sort of like a little bit higher, go higher,
Right.
multi-story.
Right.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and then I was going to say, I lost my train of thought. I'll come back to it.
I did want to congratulate you that on the land use diagrams, they were very clear. So I just really like them. The only thing I would say is that add streets to them so that folks know sort of, where it is, because that area is very residential. It was very difficult to tell that, gosh, is that like, right there, from where I sit, or is it here, or...
Yeah, no, that's a good point. For the planning diagram, at this point in time, we have the major corridors mapped out. What we wouldn't be able to bring to you as part of the specific plan is the nuanced streets that would go within each of the developments that are going to go in Hilltop.
Yeah,
So that'll happen when a developer brings in a project. You'll get that more finer grain detail in the street layout. But the backbones are in the plan. What's missing is sort of the rest of the skeleton as far as streets are concerned.
Yeah, I was talking more about, this is Research Drive, or, some of the streets that are there currently that I didn't see in those diagrams. So it was a little difficult to tell where.
Right, okay. For the areas surrounding the site. I remember now what I was going to mention is that you will be happy to hear that we've heard from the community and most of all the stakeholders that there's certain uses, industrial uses that were not desired for the area. We're no longer talking about that. We're looking at specific employment uses. Just today, as a matter of fact, we told the developer that we didn't want to see data centers, film studios. What was the other one? Data centers. Basically, larger warehouse, uses. There's no logistical component now, so we're looking at potential medical uses, biosciences, research and development. basically we're telling them that, we want employment intense uses there and not necessarily a use that's just going to have 3 or 4 employees, but a large building that takes a large swath of land.
So you're talking about more offices rather than these warehousing, a box-like structures, right? More
Potentially, but when we
offices.
come back, we'll give you that more refined list of potential land uses that could be employment uses.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Yeah, we're making ground, so I'm happy with the progress that we've made, and hopefully you'll see that, but there's still more refinement that can be had.
Thank you. All right, any other staff or any other commission comments?
Yeah,
Okay.
Did you want to say something?
I do have a couple of report outs, but
Okay. Just 2 things. One is about the shoreline district. I feel that there does need to be more clarity about how to interpret the language that was adopted by City Council for the shoreline district. Not the language, or maybe the language as related to the map. So, the shoreline district language has kind of 2 aspects of it. One is right along the shore, if there could be public access, and it's totally appropriate to say, no, it shouldn't be there inside the harbor. But there's another aspect which says that nearby streets should have public access to get close to the shore, and properties that are bordering those that are also on the shore should be somewhat responsible for that. And that seems like it's not reflected in the map. So I'm looking forward to, and we talked to the director today, and she thought that there was a way to get some more clarity about that. So hopefully we'll hear back from staff about how, because there's other projects on the shoreline. This isn't the last project that will be on the shoreline, so it'll be important to just get clarity about how this gets interpreted. So that's all. That was just a statement. And then the second thing is that I was at the neighborhood council meeting last night, and Councilmember Zepeda said that he had made a motion that was accepted to have art on the walls of the council chambers. And I look around and I see that that has actually happened. And I think it might have been today that it happened. But this is now going to be rotating art where artists in Richmond can display their work. And I think it's a great idea, and they were blank walls, and it's a great use of the walls. So I commend the council member for that.
Okay. Staff, yes.
yeah, real quick, just a couple of items related to the upcoming Planning Commissioners Academy. As you know, those are held annually during the month of March, so I want to put that on your radars. The dates for the conference are going to be March 6th through 8th. It's going to be at the Hilton Long Beach Hotel in Long Beach, of course. So City Manager Curl is really encouraging me to have you guys go. For those of you that are interested, especially newer commissioners, we looked at our budget for the Planning Division training just this morning, and it does look like we have a budget to fly most of you and have accommodations covered. So I'm going to be following up with an email later on next week to sort of give you a deadline for your interest and get things rolling as far as reservations. But for those of you that are not aware, this academy is a good training to attend for new commissioners. Covers a wide range of topics, things that come up during meetings by way of projects, and it'll allow you to foster some relationships with other planning commissioners throughout the state. So really great opportunity to take advantage of.
What's the date again?
March 6th through 8th, and again, I'll follow up with more details. The next item that I want to touch that Chair Tucker always brings up is PC appointments. Wanted to give you an update on that. So we do have a new commissioner on board. We're making some progress. I'm told from the mayor's office that they have an item on the February 20th meeting to potentially assign a new commissioner. We have had an influx of commissioner applications, so it sounds like good news, and hopefully we'll make some more progress there. And then lastly, I just want to give you a heads up that the meeting for February 15th has been canceled, so our next meeting will be March 7th. And we will also be polling commissioners to see if we are available for a March 21st special meeting. So be on the lookout for that. And that concludes my staff reports.
I would just note that if there is a March 7th and the training is the 6th through 8th, that the 7th might be compromised. So.
Good point.
Just-
Let's hold it in Romney.
Yeah, right, we'll do it all virtual. And then just for those, and especially Commissioner He, I mean, it is, I have attended, and then Commissioner Loy has attended. It is a good opportunity to kind of get some of the basics of Planning Commission, and then especially with now all the new state regs, it probably would be a worthwhile attendance. So that's my plug for, if you can, please go. All right, I don't have anything else other than just to say I'd like to close tonight's meeting. You know, we all heard, and we're all shocked of the passing of former Mayor Irma Anderson. You know, Irma was kind of like a second mom. You know, Ahmad and I grew up together, so you know, it's always a loss, but it was during her time on the council, she shepherded a lot of great policies on behalf of the city of Richmond and the residents, and so if we can just adjourn in her memory, greatly appreciate it. Thank you. And on that.